Food justice is really about creating a fair and equitable food system. So the food system includes everyone who's an eater, which is all people, how that food is produced, the environmental resources that draws on, the farms, the farmers, the processing facilities, restaurants, the whole complex ecosystem that we humans engage with as part of our eating. And food justice is really about how do we feed ourselves in a way that's fair and equitable.
We would like to see a more just food system for everyone that lives in the Adirondack Park.
A lot of our issues are hidden in rural areas. You can't tell looking at a rural landscape, which houses have an elderly resident who can't leave the house, for example, or which towns have the most poverty, or which farms are treating their workers fairly versus the ones that aren't. The distance is challenging for organizations as well, which is what the North Country Food Justice Working Group tries to do, is to create a once-a-year gathering and also digital tools so that organizations that are working on similar projects can connect with each other and learn from each other in a way that's so much easier in a densely packed urban area.
What does food justice look like in the Adirondacks? And so some of the things that came to the surface at the Food Justice Summit was, in fact, that within the Adirondack Park, we have some really specific issues to think about, and we have a very specific context, which also includes just being rural. We do have issues around fair pay for farmers, and we do have issues around fair wages and worker rights for farm workers.
Because farming is such an economically challenging livelihood, the people who often bear the brunt of it are the farm workers. And so, across the region we have things like H-2A workers and undocumented migrant workers and documented workers, but they all have varying degrees of challenges around that. So farm to farm, they have different wages, they have different working environments, and food justice is really about the idea that everybody deserves a fair wage and everyone deserves a safe working environment.
Farmers tend to ignore their own poverty in order to continue to produce food and provide this community service of food production, right? We're producing food for people to eat, but we're ignoring the fact that we are not sustaining our own families. All types of farmers, whether you're conventional, organic, small, in terms of acreage or dollars, or big, all struggle with the ability to get back as much as they put in.
The same reason that farmers are struggling to make a living are the same reasons why there's other people who can't afford to pay for food. We have an economic system that treats some people very well and other people suffer for it.
Poverty and access to good, healthy, nutritious food, affordable food, those two problems are pretty closely intertwined. We as a region, we as a state and we as a country need to start to look at these things as kind of really closely intertwined, complex problems. If you ask a farmer what they think the #1 issue is in food justice, they're going to say farmer wages, right? Fair prices for their products. And if you ask, a family in the Adirondacks who is piecing together multiple jobs to make ends meet, they're going to say the prices of food are too high, right? So no matter who you talk to, they're going to identify a different issue. And so I think when we gather together to talk about food justice issues, it's important to have all of those different voices around the table so that they can represent each of the issues.
How are we going to create a just system for everyone is a pretty daunting question, right? And that is hard for some people to wrap their heads around. It's impossible for me to wrap my head around. But if I think about food justice as a lens through which we can start trying to create a food system that we are in charge of, a food system that farmers are in charge of and that consumers can access, right? We can grow the food here. People can buy our food, but we gotta make sure that it's affordable and that farmers don't go out of business. So for me, the food justice conversation is really about creating that freedom for people to run farms and produce food, and for consumers who want the food to be able to eat it and access it on their own.
The Adirondacks, and also our particular pocket of the Adirondacks is an anomaly. We are doing a few things really well. We have some wonderful women who are taking the lead on starting farms or producing really interesting value-added foods, or heading up nonprofit organizations, taking the lead on social issues.
Nationwide, most farms are operated by men. Most farms are owned by men, but smaller, organic, sustainably farmed operations tend to be a little more equitable. There are a lot of women-owned farms in the regions. It's one of the nice things about this region, and one of the reasons women are able to farm is because they're buying smaller pieces of land, they're doing smaller operations, and then there's less of a high barrier to entry.
We have this really interesting convergence right now of first-generation farmers moving to a really beautiful area, trying to create something new, and at the same time looking at how they can enhance and revitalize the communities around them through food, through what they're making.
If you look at food justice as a holistic system that is trying to work for everyone and maybe everything as well, then environment absolutely does get included in that, and that we hope that our food can be produced in a way that is environmentally beneficial. The wild character of the park, one of the ways it's best preserved is through vibrant communities, that the park cannot exist in a void. The communities within it have to be healthy, viable, and vibrant communities. Agriculture is the only growing sector in Essex County. If that's true, that's proof that it's pretty important to the economics and the vibrancy of the communities within the park.
Access to food is really challenging, and in rural areas like this one, most towns don't have a grocery store anymore. They don't have a place to buy food.
The food access piece of the food justice movement, I would say, is allowing some of those obstacles that you experience in rural communities such as Keysville, the obstacle of lack of transportation or reliable transportation. The price point of food can be so high, so trying to keep these local farmers and producers afloat while also incorporating the community into the purchasing is really a big part of that, trying to fill all the gaps to the food system.
The pharmacy is doing on the ground, like boots on the ground work to make local food more accessible to the portion of the population that doesn't tend to have the access or the resources to be able to afford local food.
ADK Action was really interested in trying to help solve the food access issue in Keysville a few years ago. We just have this one main street, and it's got beautiful historic buildings right on the river, but the big empty grocery store downtown was a blight on the community and just served as a reminder of the fact that there wasn't a lot of investment in the downtown district, and it left a really tangible hole of food access here. We're trying to figure out how we could bring all the local food from the farms around town into the downtown without too much overhead. And so we came upon the idea of trying to incorporate a farm fresh store inside an existing business. Tens of thousands of dollars are given out in SNAP benefits each month in Essex County. The pharmacy here accepts those benefits. And so it's great because it's one of the few opportunities for local residents to use their benefits to buy local food. And so you get that economic impact because you're spending money locally, you're keeping those benefit dollars within the county, which is great. And you're also making the bounty from local farms accessible to lower income people.
There's so many small farms. There's some really interesting cooperative farming movements that are happening. There's small farms that are doing CSAs or doing sliding scales and food assistance, and there's organizations offering grants so that farmers can give some of their CSA shares away for free, and that gives me hope. It gives me hope for the future, it gives me hope for our planet, and hope that maybe we can live in a world where everybody gets to eat.